Hey, you're listening to Unfiltered, real talk about sex and love with Ashley
and Heather. And today we're going to be talking about really questions that relate to navigating anger and a lack of attraction during sex. And one of the things that I love about the questions that we receive from our audience is that we might just get one or two sentences in a question, just like straight to it. But sometimes we end up even getting like 8 paragraphs, somebody telling us their full story, which we love that. And we feel so privileged to have that. And so sometimes when we write these questions, there might be pieces missing only because we can't really grab the entire conversation, right. But we want to be sure to capture the heart behind the question.
Yeah, and even along with that, we love seeing the questions come in, and we do say, send us your questions, and we usually send some kind of response back, letting the person know that we got the questions, and we're definitely going to put them on the show. These are all questions straight from listeners. We didn't create any of these. But I also just wanted to remind people, if you need something immediately, you need an action step, like to help joining a group or figuring out if you can get a counseling consultation, anything like that, then just, contact our direct line or don't send it to Unfiltered, because a lot of those sit in our inbox until we're ready to start creating new show questions. And so we have other email addresses and phone numbers to call if there's something immediate. But other than that, we save the questions and then we get to share them on the show. And it is one of our favorite parts of our job. So here we go.
Nice.
Okay, the first question is, I feel rage every time I have sex with my husband. I'm angry about how he took advantage of me all these years by having sex with himself and stealing my sex. I get that. I do not want him to feel any pleasure because he has already stolen enough pleasure for a lifetime through his abusive behaviors. How can I possibly move forward in this relationship? And I am a woman who likes sex. So I get this. There's been times where John's relapsed and I've just been like, thanks a lot for ruining sex for both of us, because it's even though you're not the cause of your spouse's acting out and you're not going to fix it, it all impacts you. So just the betrayal that you can feel, or even needing to say, okay, I have to set boundaries. That's hard. And we'll get women who say, I can't be in this abusive marriage anymore, or I need to talk with my husband, but I'm worried it's going to create conflict, or I'm worried it's going to create distance. And those are legitimate concerns, and they're probably very realistic outcomes of having these hard conversations or boundaries, but they're necessary, because the alternative is staying stuck in the same cycle over and over and over. And I would rather have some kind of change, even if it's hard to get there, to not stay stuck there. So I would say that at first is that it just is not an easy thing. There's sometimes just not easy answers. I would say for this woman or man, whoever, well, she does say husband. So for this woman who submitted this question, if you haven't been through a betrayal and beyond, that would be my first answer for almost every question having to deal with betrayal, because it's a process to deal with the anger and to figure out even what you're angry about, to be able to connect your thoughts and your feelings and be able to take action steps. I would also say that it's very much okay to not be having sex right now. I see here that you say you like having sex. I understand that. But the danger of having sex when you're still so angry and feeling used is then you're just like reinforcing that network and associating those feelings with having sex. And you want to not have that be part of your sex life. So I would say, as hard as it is to take a break, to get yourself healing and go through a betrayal and beyond, to be very vocal and honest with your husband, saying, I feel used, and then just reel it all the way back. So it might just be, we're snuggling on the couch, and then when that feels comfortable, then you're holding hands. When that feels comfortable, then maybe you move into a kiss. When that feels comfortable, maybe you sleep in the same bed. Maybe then you bump up, level up to sleeping in the same bed naked. Maybe that's too triggering and you pull it back then to, okay, we can sleep in the same bed but not naked, or we can't touch, and so just baby step your way until it starts feeling comfortable.
Right, because the last thing that we want is for women to be in a situation like this and then they're being re-triggered or re-traumatized by continuing to have sex with somebody that makes them feel used, and that they have so much anger in with what's going on. The other thing too to remember is when you're in a group like Betrayal and Beyond, it gives you the opportunity to not only work through all of these situations and these triggers, but also it helps you to develop language
Yes.
for when the time comes that you can, in a really proactive, intentional way, say things out loud to your husband about how all of this has made you feel. And because a lot of times we don't recognize that at the core of our anger is that not only has something been manipulated or even taken away from us, but there's something now about it that makes us feel unsafe. And so being able to have a voice in the situation in a way that is proactive and intentional, and where you are given the opportunity to say what you need to say out loud to your spouse, because even that in and of itself will help to rebuild that connection and rebuild that trust. But a lot of times, like you said, it takes going through all those little baby steps to get to a place where where your response is going to do more help to the relationship than harm.
Yeah, and even within one marriage, there could be varying reasons of why you're feeling used. Because I had mentioned this on another podcast, I could feel used during sex simply because, not simply, but just because my husband's looking at porn. Like, if you're looking at that, then in my mind, you don't want me. So why, are you just thinking of that while you're having sex with me? That's one example of feeling used. Another could be if they're emotionally withdrawn or still living a very addict life and doing what they want to do during the day, or not engaged with you, and then they crawl in bed after you've had a tired day and want sex. Like, that's another reason you could feel used. There's different reasons why you might be feeling used, and that's going to be very specific to each situation. And so knowing what to verbalize, what boundaries to put in place, what kind of healing through past trauma. I mean, is he in group and doing all the work, and this is just something stuck that's becoming a flashback or trigger during sex for you? Or is there problems in the marriage that still need to be worked on? And yeah, that takes time to unpack.
Yeah, which is all good. And again, just finding one thing that you can do to help in that process is a great first step.
Yeah, and probably just starting by saying, I don't know what I need right now, but I need to take a pause and figure out what I need, and then take a next step. Okay, the next question. I am severely unattracted to my husband. He has acted out for our entire marriage, lying about it and pretending to be someone different. He walks around fantasizing that some woman will save him because he's so insecure. I'm attracted to men with an emotional and spiritual maturity and a strength that comes from their inner being. Now I just see him as a nerdy teenage boy, and I don't know how to move past this. What should I do? I get this. We have wives that will say they feel like their husband is just another child they have to take care of because of that emotional and spiritual immaturity. And so I do think I remember feeling this way. Like, I am so unattracted to John. I do not trust him. It's not like his physical appearance changed, but my attraction to him changed when discovery happened. And I will say that there is so much hope that can come back if everybody's doing the work. That feeling you have now does not have to stay, and it doesn't have to be discouraging. I remember thinking, I have to be in this life sentence of a marriage with somebody I'm not attracted to anymore and I don't trust. And that is depressing.
Right.
But it doesn't have to stay that way if he gets into a 7 pillars group and counseling and starts doing his work. Because as his spiritual, emotional maturity happens and develops, that's going to become more attractive. Just the other day, I woke up and John was reading Worthy of Her Trust by, I think, Jason Martinkus. And I was like, very attractive. That is very attractive in my head to see him reading a book about how he broke my trust. Other mornings, if I wake up and he's playing video games, I'm just like, not attractive. And I'm not saying this is like a checklist of things to do, but you'll start to see behaviors in your husband that let you know that he's spiritually growing. And so if there's a lack of emotional and spiritual maturity, then he probably has some work to do. And that would be my first start, is not focusing on the attraction, but focusing on the work that needs to be done. And then the feelings normally follow once the maturity starts to develop. Because when people enter into addiction, they emotionally stunt their growth when they start engaging in that addiction.
And this is one of those situations too, where if your husband is in group and in counseling and willing to do the work, then great. That's a great step. If he's not willing to do the work, we always would still recommend that you, for this wife in the situation, that you still get healing for yourself,
Right.
that you go through betrayal and beyond, that you go through counseling, that you get the tools that you need for your health and for your safety. And I mean, and sometimes that's kind of a hard thing to say, because we always want for a couple to be working on their recovery and healing together, but sometimes it doesn't always work that way. And so even just for you, for your own mental health and physical health and everything else that you could need for you, I think that that's also another good thing to consider, is that even if this might end up being a little one-sided, that you pursue healing for yourself.
Yeah. And then having the language too to people say, oh, well, we separated or we had to get divorced because we fell out of love or we stopped being attracted to each other or we stopped, to try to put language with that when you are pursuing your own healing and saying the reason why I am lost attraction or the ability to feel safe or drawn to you is because of these things, because you're not emotionally available, you're not spiritually growing at all. And so that he can understand what things that he's doing that he needs to either improve on or understand this is why there's going to be more separation. I mean, nobody wants to be in a relationship with somebody who's emotionally or spiritually immature.
No. Well, because then it's just so much work.
It is so much work, and it doesn't feel safe. Like, who
Right.
wants their husband to be a teenage boy? Teenage boys make reckless decisions.
Right. Yes.
So, yeah.
So true.
So try to articulate what it is you need to feel safe and focus on that part.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so our third question today is, since my husband stepped into recovery, he is entirely different sexually. He used to never arrive during intercourse, and now he climaxes so abruptly. This makes me angry. I confronted him numerous times during our marriage about his sexual issues in bed, and he always lied and gaslit me about it. Now our sexual relationship is totally different, and I'm angry about it. How am I supposed to forgive 14 years of his lying, manipulating, and behaving like a child? It's interesting that we have similar things coming from different people in our audience.
Yep.
And this is one of the reasons why we always encourage you to send it in your questions, because a lot of times if you're thinking it, somebody else is thinking it or having the same issue. And so it is really helpful for women and for couples to hear what other people are going through. But this is the same kind of thing. I think that it definitely would be, our recommendation would be to be in group, to be in betrayal and beyond. It sounds like when she says that my husband stepped into recovery, that they're already into their recovery journey. But I guess I would be curious is if he's in a 7 Pillars group, if she's in a betrayal and beyond group, are they pursuing counseling together? And then also, I guess I would wonder about, what's the extent of the conversation? Because she says that she's talked to him about his behaviors in bed, his sexual issues in bed. And it almost seems like he maybe used to be even a little bit more sexually anorexic if he wasn't achieving orgasm during sex, but now he's achieving orgasm too soon, it sounds like, and she's not able to be as satisfied in their sexual relationship. And so that would be another thing, is to, be willing to have that hard conversation with your spouse and maybe even work on it together to see how, you guys can come together as a couple to have better sex, because really sex should be a mutually satisfying experience for both partners. And so it does get kind of frustrating when it's like, okay, he's always achieving orgasm, but I'm never getting there. And then, because I know what that feels like, I remember that. And from my first marriage, and feeling like, okay, this isn't even fun for me. And so why do I have to participate in this anymore?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And it does sound like there's two things going on here. And, Heather and I always say, if there's still trauma that hasn't been dealt with, that absolutely has to be the very first. So if he's done recovery, but I don't know if this woman has done betrayal and beyond, that has to be the first, because if you are angry, that's also going to interfere with how connected you feel sexually. And so please do betrayal and beyond if you haven't yet. The other thing I would say is what you were saying, Heather. It sounds like the pendulum has swung way over from
Yeah.
being anorexic to now he's like climaxing too soon, that could be a good sign. I mean, that he went from like not orgasming, not, reaching a climax to now he like it's showing that there's change at least, and so I would say like, Sheila Ray Gregoire has those good resources, the Great Sex Rescue, and she even has an orgasm course on her website. And so if the betrayal trauma work has been done and you are feeling emotionally and psychologically safe enough to then work on the sexual injury part of it, then I would say tackle this, like make this the next step of saying, what do we need to do? Does there need to be more of what she likes on the front end, foreplay on her part before he engages in intercourse because he's going too soon? And so it just might need to be tweaks like that. Or if there's a certain, thing that she likes or position, that they start there before going to whatever he likes. And so it just might be that like sex talk in a way where there's not shame and anger though. And so I would say if there's still anger, then that has to be worked out first, because if you bring anger in to the conversation about how to help each other have more mutually satisfying sex, then it could come across as shaming, which then contributes to performance issues for men. And then it's a cycle.
Right. Well, and I don't know why that God with our arousal cycles that, men typically can achieve orgasm in like 2 to 4 minutes, whereas for women, it takes 12 to 14 minutes. And I don't know why God didn't think that it would help us all out if we would all just achieve orgasm at the same time, but it doesn't usually work that way. And so it definitely is worth that conversation of figuring out how it can work best for both of you.
Yeah. Yeah, and the nature of addiction is selfish. So the fact that you're feeling angry that he's jacked up your sex life for the 14 years, that's valid.
Right.
And if there's lying and gaslighting involved, that's all very, very valid. But if you're at the point where you're ready to move on, if you want to make this different, if you want to have a healthy sex life with your husband, then our recommendation would be Betrayal and Beyond, and then doing some good coursework or books to try to help strengthen that sexuality between the two of you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining the conversation today. And remember, we're a listener-driven show, so send us your questions at unfiltered@puredesire.org and share this episode with a friend.